Welcome to this episode of the Man in Progress podcast. I'm super excited to introduce you guys to Brock Cannon. Brock is the founder of Prevail Botanicals, a CBD company that is focused in the outdoor lifestyle space. And he's also the founder of the men's organization, Woke Men. And Brock, I just got to say, thank you so much for taking time to be on the show.
Hey man, it's my pleasure. It's good to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. I found out about you, Brock, through Instagram. Probably less than a month ago. I started stalking and didn't even follow yet. I was just kind of like creeping, like we all do. I was just kind of
Right.
going through. I was like, wait, is this guy? I was like, okay, I see this. And but then you had a video. I don't know if didn't even look at the date, if it was a few days ago, weeks ago, where you had like your 3 tips for helping with anxiety, and it just hit me as someone who has dealt with anxiety and depression myself, and was like, man, I just gotta reach out to this guy and see if he'd ever be interested in talking. And for people who are out there, Brock, who don't know, maybe haven't heard of you before, do you mind just giving a little bit of background on your journey in the last little bit of your life, of kind of what's got you into helping other men, and what led you up to that point of wanting to help other men?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my background is, I guess, kind of unique. I was the oldest son of 4 kids. Grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, in a Mormon family, very strict religious beliefs, and kind of a lot of pressure as the oldest to do the right thing, to be the example. My mom was a single mom for a lot of years. We were pretty poor. We all had jobs to help contribute to the family. And, I think I didn't even realize at the time, but, and my dad was involved. We spent time with my dad even after my parents were divorced. But I didn't realize it at the time, but I think I had a lot of subconscious beliefs about who I was as a boy, then becoming a man, and never really talking about emotion, never talking about feeling, and really never knowing how to. And so, this suppression journey began, probably at 13 years old, and continued into my adult life for so long. So, I had a lot of depression, but I just kind of stuffed it aside. I had anxiety. I kind of stuffed it aside. I lacked confidence. The only thing that changed for me when I was 16 years old was I got into mountain bike racing, cross-country mountain bike racing, and ended up working really hard at it and having some success, and ultimately went professional by the time I was 18. And that was kind of like my outlet. That was how I dealt with my pain, my emotions, my fear. It's how I gained my confidence. But it also became a little bit neurotic, in that my entire happiness was based on if I crushed my workout that day, if I did it exactly how I was supposed to, if I, was going to nationals or World Cups or whatever, and it was all dependent on that. And, there was so many positives, and thank God, I wasn't into drugs or alcohol or other things that could have led me down some dark roads. It was just a sport. But at the same time, it's interesting to look back and realize kind of how that all started. So, that was up until the time I was 19. And then I actually went on a Mormon church mission to South Korea for 2 years. I was still doing the religious thing, came back and just kind of did what I was told to do according to the religion. I was married at 21. I had my first kid by the time I was 23. And, I look back and I was just a baby. And, I've had a lot happen since then. I'll be 39 next month. And, looking back on my life, I think I would say very, very real that it took me 38 years to realize I was running from pain my whole life, and never willing to slow down, to face it, to internalize it. And so it was literally just last year that I had this huge explosion in my life, but also that explosion kind of birthed this awakening. And I've been on a journey ever since to work on myself, do the inner work, which I'm still a work in progress, which is right in line with the name of your podcast. You know, it's like, we're always a work in progress. But there's been a lot of positive shifts in my life that have happened. And, you know, I realized through some other circumstances that not just men, but everybody needs to be able to handle their pain and actually face their emotions in a different way. So,
Yeah. I think that, there's a lot there that I would love to follow up on with you, because usually one of the first things I like to ask is how old you are. So you're going to be 39 in a month, you said?
yeah.
Okay, going to be 39, and I'm 33, and I think it's something that I've noticed time and time again. I work with a lot of young business owners and starting out, and there's this perception of time, and by 39, right, we should have it figured out. We should have life planned out. Everything should be good. We should be settled. And I'm learning more and more that that's just not reality. Or people who have been settled and thought, yep, that was it, I'm settled, are coming to these awakenings in life of, wait, maybe there's a whole nother part of my life that needs to happen. And I guess I'd love to start there. You said that for 38 years, you felt like you were running away from pain. I guess my first question for you is, now that you've been going through this process, what do you feel like that pain has been? Or have you made some sense of, for yourself, of what that pain you were running from was?
Yeah. And it's a continual exploration and journey. And there's days where I'll just have deeper aha moments around it. But, you know, I think the gist of it was, number one, I was running from pain of pressure as a kid, you know, feeling like I had to be perfect, really never dealing with my parents' divorce, you know, oldest of four. It's so funny. I reflect on it, and family or neighbors would be like, "Hey, Brock, how are you doing? You know, with your parents splitting up." And I was the kid that would be like, "It's fine, whatever, no big deal,"
Yeah.
you know, and I just brush it off. And meanwhile, my younger three siblings were bawling and in tears all the time, but actually allowing themselves to feel it. And I just never did that. And I think I felt like I had to be strong. I had to be the tough one. And that just started that journey of suppression. So, you know, I was running from the ability to feel. And, you know, we all have ways in which we numb.
Yeah.
And I numbed through endurance sports, you know, doing these crazy races, putting my body in so much pain to where after I was just like numb, you know, and
Yeah.
not have to
Yeah.
feel, not have to think. And, you know, people are like, you know, well, that's maybe better than some ways we can numb, but, you know, some people numb with drugs, some people numb with alcohol, some people numb with porn, some people numb with TV or watching sports, or they're just workaholics. Like, we all have our ways that we numb. And some are better than others, and some are going to have more side effects than others, so to speak. But, you know, that was the big one. And beyond that, I think I'm probably just like so many people, maybe not everyone, but so many people, we wonder if we're just enough, if just
Yeah.
our individuality, our identity of just exactly who we are is enough. And I think even into my adult life, I always sought this external validation from other people to tell me that I was enough. And, you know, without going too far into the story, you know, ultimately at about age 30, 31, I can't remember exactly, I decided to kind of leave the faith of my youth and find my own path of spirituality. And in the Mormon faith, it was pretty devastating to my mom, to my family, to have the oldest son now go off and not do this anymore, where I was doing all the textbook stuff according to the religion, and then I didn't. And so there was a lot of disappointment, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt around that. And so I think that worsened it in a lot of ways to where I didn't have the validation of any family. And I was this lone wolf out trying to figure out who is Brock Cannon and what's his spiritual path and what's his purpose. And I stumbled a lot, and I looked for a lot of attention in the wrong places. I made a lot of mistakes and bad life choices that affected me and hurt other people. And I think ultimately the biggest thing that I hope to convey to everyone, but particularly men, is just that everything we need is already right here. Like we're enough. And maybe we look at ourselves in the mirror and we realize we're not perfect, or maybe we realize we're not exactly where we'd like to be, but just in our natural state, we are enough. And so that
Yeah.
was a big thing for me.
What do you feel like, thank you for sharing that part of your journey, by the way. It makes me really curious to get your opinion on, why do you feel like as men who, especially someone looked at you from the outside, right? You've been a professional mountain biker, right? An incredible athlete. You're in shape, right? You know, you're going on 39. You could easily pass for 30. And there are these people who might look at the outside and go, Brock, man, I just want to be like you. You seem like you have life figured out. You're at the top. You were, you know, a pro athlete doing all these cool things. Yet there's this feeling of like you described, not feeling like enough. Why do you think men in particular struggle with feeling like enough?
That's such a great question, and I don't think I have all the answers with that. But
Yeah.
I think so much of it is our culture, how we're brought up, and what tradition of our society says, and that is that, you know, and it's just changed in so many ways. And I mean, there's I think statistically now more women actually working in the world than men in the workforce. So much has changed. But I think, you know, from say the 1950s up until the last 20 years, it's been men are the providers. They need to go kick ass. They need to conquer. They need to have all their shit figured out. And it's like, if you don't, you're labeled as a failure.
Mm.
And that's what's been our stereotypical definition of masculinity, or the masculine man. And that's changing now. You know, you probably know some people. I know some people they're stay-at-home dads, and they're awesome at it, and they
Yeah.
have a good balance with their spouse, and it's all cool and it's all changing. But you know, I think we've had all that pressure, and it's 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 also men not being able to talk or have a safe place often, or have other men that they can just be like, dude, I'm struggling. Like, and
Yeah.
I'll maybe get into a story in a second. I could tell you of a couple huge instances that I had that woke me up. But I think a lot of it is just the societal upbringing of how we're supposed to be as men.
Yeah. Yeah. I thank you for sharing that. I just, to me, it's always interesting. I love to be able to just get other people's thoughts on where all this comes from, why we have this built in, right? And you see really confident, or on the outside would appear to be really confident, strong men. And if you get to sit down with them and actually become really good friends with them, and they open up, and you realize, man, a lot of them are struggling with the same things that everyone else is struggling with. It just, they've never had a safe place to open up about and share that. And I guess I'd love to ask you, do you feel like that took a while to develop, or was it always there that you could open up with your other male friends about struggling? Is it something that's recently come about, or do you feel like you're still in progress of figuring out how to develop those bonds with male friends where you can truly be open and vulnerable and share what you're feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting because I think some guys are a little more extroverted. You know, maybe they seemingly have a ton of guy friends that they go out and do stuff, or they play ball with, or whatever. And then there's more introverted guys. You know, for me personally, I've always been the type, I never had a ton of friends. I just had a handful, probably on one finger, of good friends that I call in weekly and just check in. And we don't even see each other that much necessarily, but they're the kind of friend, you know, that's always there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I guess I'll just get into the story. So last year I had made some choices in my life that ultimately were not the wisest. You know, looking back now, it's kind of like everything unfolds and you realize maybe that was the lesson you had to learn at the right time. But at the time, it was so devastating to me that I was I went on a camping trip. I went on a road trip just to clear my mind, try to like figure out what was next. And I had gotten so depressed. I was in this little town in Idaho, the backside of the Grand Tetons, not far from Jackson Hole. And I was going to end it. I was starting to think about ways to end it. And, you know, I didn't have like a full detailed suicide plan or anything, but my mind was going there, and I was in a dark enough place that I was like, I'm no good here. Like, why am I of any value to the world? And it was just real. And
Yeah.
thank God, someone talked to me through that on the phone for literally 3 hours. It's the woman who's now my fiance. I literally say she
Yay.
saved my life.
Yeah.
And, you know, so much has changed since, but, you know, that was a big wake up call. And, you know, and I had the whole thing, like I was admitted to the hospital for evaluation, and like,
Yeah.
thank God, like everything happened and it was okay. And I've never had thoughts of it since. But
Yeah.
what was so crazy about this, and the point of the story that I want to really make is, on the way home, I was driving back and I called one of my good buddies from college. His name is Jeremy. We were on the cycling team together. This guy was a pro cyclist, literally raced with Lance Armstrong, you know, makes a couple $1,000,000 a year. He has his own company, successful in every way on the outside. And I called him and I was like, dude, I don't know who else to call. I haven't talked to you forever, but like, this is what just happened. Like I was considering taking my life. Like, I don't need you to do anything. I'm just here to tell you.
Yeah.
And he got really quiet. And on the other end of the phone, he said, Brock, I can't believe you're calling. This is like eerie timing, because last week I had the barrel of a gun down my throat and I almost did it. And I was like, holy shit, dude. And I was like, all right, well, talk to me. And, you know, he's like, we need to help each other out. And, you know, for the next month,
Yeah.
we just checked in every day, just even a quick text, like, how's it going? How's it going? And things got worse for him. And, you know, he's had a rough road. But the point to the story was, we just never know who's suffering.
Yeah.
And then subsequently that same year, I was out trail running with another friend. Again, looked completely successful on paper. And then we were going up to this really cool peak near Salt Lake City. And he's like, I got to be honest, man, like last year I was considering throwing myself off this peak because I felt like I was of no value to my family anymore. I was a failure as a man.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I was like, I'm going to make a men's group, because not that I'm some authority on masculinity or I have all the answers, but just to create a safe place where guys can come and talk about this stuff before it gets escalated to where they want to take their lives.
Yeah.
And, you know, the statistics I think are heavily favored. There's different statistics out there, but it's mostly men that are suicide, you know, and it's something that I think can be handled in a very different way.
Yeah. I really, really appreciate you sharing that story. And it's actually really interesting. I have a different podcast that I ran for a long time that I did an episode where I told the story of it's literally titled How I Checked Myself into a Psych Unit. And I admitted myself. I tried to get admitted. The psychiatrist at the time was like, we don't have beds. And so he just wrote me a script and sent me home. Really interesting how that played out. My mom came, kind of similar story of, I just called my mom and she pretty much walked me through, kind of like with you and your friend. And I look and I guess I'd like to ask you if you're willing to share a little bit of why do we just sit in that shame? Like, why do we as men, or why do you think as men, or maybe in ourselves, we allow that sense of shame, of guilt, of that whole gambit of emotion? We'd rather just sit with it ourselves than share that with other people. I guess I'd be curious on your thoughts on just reflecting back. Like I've spent a lot of time thinking of my own time of, I was embarrassed. I was afraid that I was going to be considered a fraud. I was going to be looked at as weak or less than. And I want to follow up after that of kind of what's happened since you've opened up. But do you have any thoughts on kind of that, why we sit in that shame and that guilt for so long?
I don't know. I think it's fear. It's maybe some traditional male conditioning that if we open up and are actually vulnerable, that we're scared that we'll be perceived as weak, and that's not appropriate for a man to be able to look weak. Women are so much better, generally speaking, and obviously there's some women that are more masculine, some women that are more feminine in their nature, but generally speaking, they're so much better. And all you need to do is, not right now, there's no congregating at coffee shops happening, but if you were to walk by a coffee shop on a sunny day here in Santa Barbara, you'll see women just talking, or over a glass of wine, talking about their feelings and their problems. And generally, they're just so much better at sharing with their girlfriends and getting stuff out than we are as men. We're like, dude, I can't express that. Like, it's too, I don't want to be perceived as weak or like, not a man. So I think some of it's that, but the good news is I do think that's changing. And I think there's so many great men's groups now that are leading the charge and opening that conversation to allow men to be more vulnerable, and realizing that ultimately vulnerability is not a weakness. It's 100% a strength.
Yeah. Have you found people reaching out to you, men? Have you, I guess I'd say, I'd love to know, since you've opened up maybe more about your journey and the path that you're on, and opened up about your emotions, feelings, expressing vulnerability, have you gotten more overall positive or negative feedback from both people that know you and people who are just finding you through social media or different channels?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a balance, and I'll be honest, like, I still struggle with how vulnerable I should be. And the story I just told you, I haven't told that very much. And it's like, it can be so heavy sometimes. And I think sometimes you have to be conscious of those around you, and you don't want to scare your family or your friends. But at the same time, when we do come forward and we have the courage to open up, there's always men that reach out. Like, I had a really good buddy that's an ultra marathon champion, and I had him on my podcast, and I opened up about something, and then he's like, dude, oh my God, I've had crippling anxiety since I was in 7th grade. And even though I've run all these ultra marathons and I'm a champion and like I have this huge social media following, he's like, I struggle every day to think that I'm enough. And it just takes a little bit of courage on our end as men to just open up. And it's always the same thing. Like, we're not alone. Like, everybody's feeling the same stuff, maybe some worse than others, but nobody is this perfect, like, brave male all the time that's just crushing everything. Like, we all have stuff going on.
Yeah. First off, I just want to say I'm incredibly grateful and humbled for you to share that story here with us and people listening. It's been fascinating to me to find out how many people have had, if not one, or a long series of dark places that they've been in, and have just kind of sat quietly in them. And I just think that the more that we hear other people have experienced that, it's comforting in a sense to know that I'm not crazy, I'm not alone, that other people go through this. So I just want to say thank you first for that, because it's a huge willingness to be vulnerable, and I want that for you to know that I really appreciate that. And Brock, I'm really fascinated by this, and I don't know if this has ever crossed your mind. I've been thinking a lot more about time and age, and like where I should be in life, and what should I have accomplished by now, and 33, should I have kids by now, should I be married by now? I'm single right now, currently not in a relationship, and these there's days where I ebb and flow between, well, I should be so much further ahead, or yo, look, like, at least I'm not in a bad relationship or something like that. You're 38 going on 39 now. You're at this juncture in life, and how much have you ever thought about, has that ever weighed on your mind of like, where am I at in life, and comparison, and where you should be? And how are you dealing with that now compared to, say, maybe even 10 years ago?
Oh my God. I'm really glad you're bringing this subject up, because I think about this all the time. And even today, like, believe me, I still deal with this. I'm like, I'm going to be 39, which is very close to 40. And I remember when I was younger, I was like, 40 is way out there. Like, and I should have everything figured out by the time I'm 40. And I have, sometimes doubts almost on a daily basis, where I'm just like, this is not where I wanted to be, and I've had, last year kind of like marked this complete start over of my life in so many ways. And it's humbling sometimes. And you're like, I didn't think this is where I was going to be, and I should have everything figured out. But I think it's pretty common for men, especially in their 20s, maybe they graduate college or whatever, and they're like, heck yeah, like I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30 and be set. And I had the same thing, and I had all this fire around my career in my 20s, and 30 came around and I wasn't there, and I think the thing we have to realize is, while we have to value every day and realize life can be short, for most of us, and in today's age, like we're going to live a lot longer. We're going to live healthier. We're just, as we're in the middle of a pandemic, saying that, but it's like, I think generally speaking, life is long. And I mean, I'm almost 39, like I said, and I feel healthier than I've ever felt. I'm like, my weight's better and just everything. And so we have time, and we have time to, if we're not on the right path or business or thing, if we don't like what we're doing, like we can change it. There's still time. I mean, there's people reinventing themselves into their 60s and 70s now every single day. So we have that time. I don't think we have to have it all figured out. I think the key is just that if we know we need to make a shift, we have to have the courage to make the shift, appreciate the past, be humbled by the past, because it taught us the lessons that took us up to that point. And, but yet I still feel that every day. I'm like, my brother's 2 years younger, and on paper, it looks like he has so much more figured out, and he's the poster child for this and that, but it's okay. And I feel every day like I'm grateful that my awakening came at 38 than never at all, because all that other shit that I never dealt with would have dragged into, maybe, and as I was an old man, like who knows? So it's just appreciating where we are and knowing we can change at any time.
It's something I'm really passionate about. I'm really excited at some point to have to interview some men who are in their 70s, 80s, and really ask them, like, where did you think you would be when you were 33? Like where you are now, where would you like to be? Because I just think it's the more I've opened up about it with friends. I live with my best friend who's 33 as well. And we just sit there sometimes. It's like, where should we be in life? And have to remind ourselves, well, there's no should be. It's just, where are you and where are you going to go from here? And I would love to know, because Brock, I want to ask you a couple questions about helping men with anxiety and tips on that. But I'd love to ask you real quick, what do you feel like Brock 10 years ago was afraid of? And what is Brock now afraid of? And in the sense of like fear of life, maybe not like spiders or, heights, but like, what are the things that really were worrying you 10 years ago, and what's on your mind now? I think we don't open up enough or often enough of like, here's what I'm actually truly worried about or fearful of.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question, actually. What was I most afraid of 10 years ago? Well, 10 years ago, I was winding down my first 10-year marriage. I was still very much in the Mormon faith, 2 kids, working, and yet inside, I was struggling emotionally to hold it together, because I think at that point I was starting to have questions. Is this church life for me? Is this really who I am and want to be? And yet my spouse is very into it, and this is going to be a deal breaker. So I think that was my biggest fear. I was in a lot of turmoil around, do I really listen to my heart, or do I continue to just go along, go to church every Sunday, and look like I'm playing the part socially to everybody else in the family? So that was probably my biggest fear then. And, thank God I did have the courage to take the step and do the thing I was afraid of, although it wasn't easy by any means. Ended up getting divorced.
Brock, can I ask you a question there? And I apologize for cutting you off. Just really curious. The more that I've opened up about this, and I work with, my previous job was a physical therapist and worked in healthcare. And burnout's a huge thing in our profession. And there's so many people that just their heart is telling them to leave. I view that as a relationship. Their brain is saying, stick with comfort, what's safe, what's known. And I'd love, if you're willing to share a little bit, how did you work through the process of choosing your heart over maybe what society would tell you to do? Because I think there's a lot of people who are afraid to trust their heart. I think there's a lot of people who are afraid to, I think as men in particular, feel that emotion and actually allow to sit with it rather than just shove it down, which is what we're all really good at. Just like, oh, don't feel that, move on, focus on something to achieve. And, but it must've been enough for you that you had to be conscious of allowing your heart to come through. And I guess I'm just curious, how did that process evolve for you? And how did you allow your heart to ultimately speak through to you? Or was it just so strong that it was going to no matter what?
Yeah, that's a really good question. But I think the thing that really was the key factor in having the courage to change that was just allowing myself quiet time and time to actually sit and be with myself. And I look back 10 years ago and it's so much better now and more defined how that process works. But I remember I would get up really early, 5:30 back then when I was starting to just explore spiritually. I was reading like books by Wayne Dyer and just, just this hunger to learn more. And then I'd go on walks out in nature. And I think just that time alone, when we allow ourselves that time to sit with our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions, the clarity is there. Usually we're just too busy to listen to it. So I think that's a huge thing for anyone trying to figure out, how do I make the jump? Can I stop forcing it? Just get quiet with yourself, and the answers are actually inside of you.
Man, I love that. The answers are already there. We're usually just not quiet enough to hear it. That's beautiful. I would love to know, before I forget, Brock, what is Brock now? You in life right now, what do you feel like are some of your bigger worries, concerns, fears maybe in life as you're moving forward?
Well, with starting over again last year in so many respects, a lot of damage happened. So, I'm very much in the process of rebuilding life and getting clear on what the next 30, 40 years are going to look like. So, last year with everything personally going on, my business suffered a lot. That's just being real. And now I have a new business partner, new strategy, and, we're trying to grow a lot this year. So it's all positive. It's all good. But, I'm just probably like anyone else, especially right now with the pandemic going on. It's like, how do we make money? How do we grow in this time? Everything is shifting. Everyone's affected by what's happening. So that's of course always on my shoulders. I'm newly engaged. How do I provide for us going forward and support her and support us and the goals of things we want to do going forward? So I guess it's typical man stuff, but it's heavy on me right now because I had that wake up call last year and I was like, I am so not where I want to be right now in life. So let's forgive what happened as much as we can, and let's look at how we can move forward. So those are a few of the things always on my mind right now, but I'm always trying to remain positive.
Absolutely. I love it. And that's something maybe we'll have to, would love to have you back on at some point of talking about self-forgiveness. Cause I think that's another thing that we as men, tend to bypass, or we just override in our system of, well, I'd rather than forgive myself, I'll just focus on a new objective and go achieve. And therefore I don't have to sit with those thoughts and think about forgiving myself. And, thank you for being open and sharing those. I think it's just, my hope with this is for people to see, and if you're listening to this, to realize that it doesn't matter how old you get, how much experience you've had, how much success you've had, these things never leave. And we as men, people in general, but men in particular, you have to continue to deal with these things and face these things and sit with them. And which leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk about with you, Brock, is you talk a lot about on Instagram about helping men with anxiety, talking about meditation, talking about being present. And I would love to know, kind of in the practice that you do. So you have a group, Woke Men. Do you mind just telling people a little bit about Woke Men and the purpose behind Woke Men?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, like I said, I just formed this organization to start to gather men just like me from all ends of the earth and kind of have a safe place to just talk about this stuff. I've since learned more about kind of how men's meetings can be run and stuff like that. You know, it's pretty new, formed it last year. It's been more online with engagement and everything. And I've kind of been bouncing back and forth between Utah and Santa Barbara over the last year. So getting a group in place physically was a challenge. But strangely enough, right now, there's no physical men's groups going on anywhere. So I know a lot of the men's groups are meeting virtually online.
Yeah.
You know, we did some of that as well, but I think there's not a replacement for the in-person kind of brotherly connection. And I hope we get back to that very soon once this is all passed. But that's kind of the objective, is just to have weekly gatherings that are free for men to talk about. And then, you know, the plan this year, once this all blows over, was to start doing some unique gatherings for men and some retreats, and just getting out in the wilderness and kind of taking each other to our edge with vulnerability, with adventure, and just having those opportunities to kind of have transformation happen.
Man, I love it. I'm a huge fan. I think that we need more and more of those across the country, probably across the world. So I think that's absolutely awesome that you've put that together. And I would love to just pick your brain real quick on, you talk a lot about anxiety. You talk a lot about ways to overcome anxiety, about meditating on your Instagram handle. And what are things that have really helped you manage your own anxiety, manage feelings of depression? Like, what have been some strategies that have been really helpful for you? If there are other men out there listening right now who are like, my only recourse up to this point has been just shove it down and bury it down. And I know that's not the healthiest way. And I need to start finding new tactics, new strategies. I guess would love to know, what do you feel like has been working for you or has helped you over the last year or more?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to really, really deeply emphasize that, you know, I've probably had maybe worse anxiety than many throughout my life. I think for so long, I just stuffed it down. But last year, when I really started just allowing myself to feel everything, wow, the anxiety really, really came out. I mean, for guys that know what it feels like to where your chest is just beating so hard, and like, no matter what you do, you can't calm down. Like that's something I've experienced. And so I know what that's like. And I'll also just open up and say, you know, I've been someone that's numbed it before. Like I have the couple glasses. Well, I wouldn't say I had like a drinking problem, but you know, a couple glasses of wine to get yourself to sleep, to calm the anxiety. Or, you know, times I've taken, you know, edible cannabis. Here it's legal in California, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, you justify all these things, and or you bury your head in work, or you bury your head in, now, you know, I ultra run now, and I have to like even be careful with that now, because I'm like, am I running for the enjoyment, or am I running to bury my feelings? And so it's very much a balance that I think we all have to look for. But, you know, literally almost 40 days ago, I think, I feel like I was so led to it, and it's changed my anxiety drastically. And that is, I don't know if you've heard of Wim Hof, the Iceman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, I'd followed him for years, and it was not long ago. It was February 16th. I was in Utah, up in the mountains of Park City, and I was just having the most anxious day. Like, I was going crazy, and I couldn't get out of my head. My mind was racing. It was going everywhere. And I'd started kind of studying the Wim Hof method a little bit. And for those not familiar, you know, Wim Hof's called the Iceman. He's got like 26 Guinness Book of World Records. He's hiked Everest in his shorts. He's swam under the ice. He's the master of all things cold therapy. And I was on this run, and it was probably 23 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was running back, and all of a sudden I just had this like voice come into my head that was like, Brock, jump into that frozen river and just allow yourself to feel that cold, and something's going to happen. And I was like, that seems crazy. But I get to the end of the run, and I couldn't shake the stop. It's like, get into the water, get into the water. So I stopped and literally stripped down. You know, I'm a fourth a mile from my car maybe, and I jump into the cold water. And I didn't stay in very long, but I got out and I felt like all of a sudden, all of my anxiety went away because I was just the cold allows you to feel. The
Yeah.
cold actually gets you back in your body. And that's what I didn't realize. And that started this journey. For the next week I was in Utah, I went out every day to these frozen lakes, frozen rivers in the middle of the snow, and I would just polar plunge right in, and it started to change me. And then I ended up getting more formally trained, and now I'm in the process of getting certified as a Wim Hof instructor. And there's breath work that you can do, and his breathing is incredible. And there's other types of breathing, obviously, but the breathing practices that he's taught have just gotten me back into my body and helped me to realize again that, you know, our bodies can produce all these feel-good chemicals naturally. Our bodies can release the norepinephrine, this healthy adrenaline, to balance everything out and keep the anxiety down. And almost 40 days ago, I quit drinking coffee cold turkey. I was drinking a lot of coffee, probably 20 to 40 ounces a day to stimulate myself. I was probably drinking 2 glasses of wine a night, 5-6 days a week. And I just quit it cold turkey. And I've never felt better. I've never felt less anxious. And, you know, you don't have to go jump into cold rivers and streams to do this. You can literally take a cold shower for 60 seconds in the morning, and you'll feel more energized and more back in your body than if you had coffee. It's crazy. And so I'm going to be going to Poland, you know, knock on wood, in December, if this pandemic's over, to do my final training module with Wim and be an instructor and bring this into my men's work, because it's the most natural, most unbelievable way that I've found to curb anxiety. It's crazy.
Wow, that's so cool that you're getting formally trained, Brock. I think it's awesome, and I just think of all the times when you hit that, you know, like you can have all the worry in the world, and then all of a sudden you get punched, right? You get punched in the face. Like all you can do is be present. You can't, like, all those thoughts are just, they're sidebars to, like, whoa, what just happened? I gotta, and it's the shock to your system. I think that's awesome that you practice that. I know quite a few friends. There's another physical therapist that I know who is huge into Wim Hof and incorporates it into his practice and helps his patients with down-regulating their systems and just being more present. So I think it's an awesome technique to use and to get into. And Brock, first, I just want to say I would love to have you back on at some point to dive further into some of this stuff. Just absolute honor to have you on and get to know you a little bit better after this. And I always like to ask people a couple of questions to wrap things up, which are, what do you hope, Brock? I'm going to take a picture real quick too while we're live, just so I can make sure we document that this happened.
Let's do it.
So if you're listening on the podcast, that was us taking a picture. That I love to ask is, what do you hope Brock 10 years from now is like? What are you hoping that he will, who are you trying to achieve in the Brock 10 years from now?
I want to continue to just be grateful every single day for where I am now and live in the present. And I think the biggest thing is I want to continue to be the man that doesn't run from anything, that's both feet planted on the ground, just firm. And by making myself whole through all these practices and everything that I've learned, to then pass it on and help other men. And you know, my goal is literally to with these workshops and things, lead men into the wilderness, to kind of just take them to the brink, let nature do the healing, let our bodies do the healing that they naturally can do, and just realize that all the other bullshit that we worry and stress about so much just doesn't need to control our lives. And I want to just be that person that's grounded enough to be able to live that by example and teach others in 10 years. So yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. Well, I really hope that at some point I will be able to go on one of those with you, because that sounds, dude, that sounds awesome. Sounds like a blast. Sounds like a much needed thing. And the last question I like to ask is, if you had to, and this, you might actually have had to do this with having kids yourself, is if you had to meet, if you met a, like, I don't know, 6 or 10-year-old, how would you describe to them, what would your answer be if they asked you, Brock, what makes a man? Or what makes
What
a
makes
man
a
a man?
man? Oh man, I've thought about that so much. That's such a great question. And I think I think to me, and Wim Hof has a similar quote around this with regards to masculinity, but I think a real man has the ability to continue to open his heart to love again and again and again, no matter how much it's been broken, no matter how wounded it's been. To have an open heart is to live fully, it's to give our greatest gift. To me, that's a man.
Yeah, I absolutely love that answer. That's, I'm gonna think on that one. I actually, I really, really love that. And Brock, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this, to dive into some of these things, for being vulnerable and opening up about your story. Um, if anyone's out there and wants to follow your journey, or maybe is interested in one of your meetups, that, knock on wood, barring this coronavirus, that we get through, if they want to keep up with you, of how they can maybe even attend one of those down the road, what's the best way to connect with you, follow you? Where should people go?
Yeah, the men's group Instagram handle is just woke men of the world. So that's it. Connect with me there. And then my personal Facebook is just the Brock Cannon, and I'm on there. I'm taking a break from my personal Instagram because I'm running like 3 other, business related accounts. I just needed a personal break, but yeah, I'd love to connect with anybody that listens for sure.
Cool. Well, guys, go follow Brock. Go stay up to date with him. I think it sounds like the meetups are going to be incredible. And I love his Instagram handle. You can just learn so much about, Brock does videos. He has quotes talking about things that we as men are going through. And Brock, I want to say thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Thank you for the good work you're doing, and continue to spread the message to the world. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brock. Thank you guys for listening. If you want to follow, please follow Brock, and also follow us at Man in Progress Podcast on Instagram. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Cheers.